Hello and Yuma. My name is Tracey Benson. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me to submit this report to the Urban Tree Festival about my region, the capital region of Australia, from the city of Canberra. To begin, I would like to acknowledge the sovereign owners of the lands on which I live and work, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. I would also like to acknowledge all elders, past, present and emerging, and thank them for their wisdom and deep connection to the beautiful lands and waters of the capital region. Canberra is known to many as the bush capital, which references the location of Australia's capital city and its proximity to bush and forest. It is also called this because of the urban treescapes, with lots of green spaces for walking, biking and exploring. Because of the bush and local trees, it is also an area at risk for bushfires, as the climate is very hot and dry in summer. We only had a few hot days until the 5th of December last year, when our summer started to take a very ominous turn. When I woke up that morning, I could smell smoke. At the time, I did not think very much about it, as there had not been very many fires around our area. Later that day, I learnt that the fire was to our east and it was burning out of control. That fire near Braidwood burned for over 90 days before finally being extinguished. By the end of that first week in December, Canberra was enveloped in smoke, reducing our usually clean mountain air to pollution levels higher than New Delhi. Summer in Australia usually means lots of time outside with swimming, barbecues and socialising in our warm climate. But last summer in Canberra, people were forced to stay inside because of the smoke, but also because of the record-breaking heat, and we had 5 days in a row with over 40 degrees Celsius. So fast forward to the end of February, the fires were finally out and we were all really excited to be able to get back out to our gardens, walking trails and beaches. Then 2 weeks later, COVID-19 restrictions hit, forcing us back again inside, except for our essential daily walks and buying groceries. And what I have noticed on these daily walks is more and more people are walking the paths with their dogs and their kids. And it's wonderful to see people reconnecting with our local gardens and parklands. Anyway, I'd like to give listeners some context to Canberra and its climate and trees, a little bit more context. Canberra is located in the foothills of Australia's Snowy Mountains and is around 600 metres above sea level. And it's about 2 hours drive from the coast and about 3.5 hours from Sydney. The climate is usually dry, a dry winter where temperatures can go down to -10, and in summer the dry heat can climb, as I mentioned, into the mid-40s. There is also a lot of bushland around Canberra and it's very vulnerable to fires for this reason. So, for example, over 500 houses were lost in 2003 due to extreme weather and bushfires in the area. So now I'll read a little bit of history of our urban forests, and this is written by Dr. John Gray, before I come back and talk a bit more about the recent developments in our urban treescapes. So now I'm quoting. The establishment of Canberra as the bush capital owes a lot to 4 people. Charles Scrivener, who selected the site of the capital in 1909, Walter and Marion Burley Griffin, who provided the prize-winning design for the city in 1912, and Charles Weston for greening the area and its surrounding hills between 1911 and 1926. European settlement after the 1820s had a significant impact on the site of the capital. Of principal concern was the destruction of tree cover on the hills surrounding the site and the consequent degradation of the shallow soils in those areas, which created widespread water and wind erosion. Rabbits in plague proportions added to the problem. When Weston arrived in Canberra in 1913, his initial priority was experimentation. He assessed the suitability of a wide range of exotic and indigenous trees and shrubs for the site and devised the best methods of planting and establishment. On a 160-hectare site at Yarralumla, Weston supplemented the Acton nursery with a much larger nursery and arboretum. Both are still in use today. The nursery served not only as a place for experimentation but for the production of plants. The arboretum to test the growth of trees was commenced in 1914. By 1920, almost 45,000 trees had been planted there. Weston also took the first steps in the conservation of the Australian Capital Territory's rural landscape. He laid down a set of conditions to achieve control over the lopping of vegetation for fodding and the killing of trees by ringbarking. In addition, he issued trees free of charge to landowners. His work, which was influenced particularly by new, in brackets, garden city thinking, at that time in Australia, achieved strong seasonal colour effects and provided protection from the bitter, cold and dusty winds. End quote. So Canberra has a beautiful combination, as I just read, of European and indigenous plants and trees. Also, just to quickly comment that prior to European occupation, all of this region in deep time was an urban ocean, and it was actually limestone plains. That was the geophysical nature of the landscape. So inland sea and limestone plains. So fast forward to 2019, and now we need to plant thousands of trees to restore our urban forest to its former state, because we've had a lot of die-off, and also to protect Canberrans against climate change and heat waves. So a recent report on the heat island effect in Canberra found that neighbourhoods with tree canopy shade of 30% or more could be up to 13 degrees cooler on a hot summer's day. So Professor Chris Brack from ANU has also been calling on the government for a long time to get on the front foot and act before we end up with whole streets of dying trees. And he says that many areas had trees near the end of their lives and they required early attention. So in particular in the region where I live, in Belconnen, there are many eucalyptus who are feeling their age, and these are susceptible to mass die-off in a heat wave. Also in some of the newer areas, plot ratios are well over 50%, leaving little room for vegetation around the block perimeter or for the backyard. So we have some challenges in our cities to regenerate our urban forests. It's also worth mentioning that last summer in the fires, and what also contributed to the smoke was the fires to the south of us, and over 80% of the national parkland to our south, the Namadgi National Park, was destroyed. And those fires came very close to the southern suburbs, and they lurked around for many weeks. So although there's a lot of work to be done, Canberra and its surrounding regions at the moment are looking very verdant, as we've had some really good rain since March. And my hope is that this translates into some milder weather this summer. And I have many hopes for this summer coming. Thank you for your time. Yerrabi.